Most countries abroad, African nations are facing a rapid food crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine that has endangered wheat and corn supplies. The crisis, coupled with climate change, has pushed a quarter of Africans towards hunger, according to reports. Dominic Stewart, head of global operations, says the causes are conflict, drought, and a lack of fuel. Recently, a UN chartered ship loaded with Ukrainian wheat destined for millions at war, risks of starvation in the Horn of Africa arrived in Djibouti. The wheat, worth about 23,000 tons, is enough to feed 1.53 million people for a month, stated the director of the World Food Programme for East Africa, Michael Dunford. Now, the equation remains: will this shipment and orders coming to Ukraine, which is at war, be sufficient to alleviate the food crisis plaguing the African continent? Find out in today's edition of Voice It. Stay with us. Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you immensely for joining us on this first edition of Voice It over your Pan-African channel. If you're watching us over 4U television or either 4U radio FM 96.3, this is Voice It, your Pan-African program that touches different matters affecting the African continent. Today we're talking food crisis in Africa, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by Mr. Nicol Simon. He is an entrepreneur as well as an economist. Good day, sir.
All right. I don't know if you can get me well.
Yeah, I can get you. Thank you for joining us.
All right. So thank you very much. Thank you for this great opportunity. I'm called Mr. Nicol Simon from Cameroun, and it's great joining you today on this great platform.
Thank you immensely. We equally have Mr. Neba Paula Zinwi, who is joining us equally here in Cameroon. He's a digital marketer as well as an entrepreneur. Thank you for joining us.
Hello Sharon, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor for me to join you on this platform and share my opinions to today's topic.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the course of this program, we shall be equally having an excerpt from the African Climate Week, set, of course, by Dr. Richard Munang, who is the director or deputy director of the United Nations Environment Program for the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get to the table and discussing today's topic of discussion, have a listen to this report. Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few seconds, we will be having this report that tackles food crisis on the African continent, given that, of course, a UN chartered ship has, of course, arrived from Ukraine in Djibouti, where it's supposed to feed or satisfy some 1.53 million people that are at risk of starvation in Africa. Take a listen to this report. Like most countries abroad, African nations are facing a rapid food crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine that has endangered wheat and corn supplies. This crisis, coupled with climate change, has pushed about a quarter of Africans towards hunger, according to reports. Some time ago, the international community of the Red Cross warned that an estimated 346 million people in Africa, which is a quarter of the population, was facing a food security crisis from the price hikes plaguing the continent. The causes, according to Dominic Stewart, head of global operations, are conflict and drought. The acute food crisis in most African countries has before now emanated from ongoing armed conflicts. With Russia and Ukraine being the global exporters of wheat, developing countries like Egypt, Nigeria, Sudan, Libya, and a host of others have deeply been affected with increase in prices of bread, fast foods, and when there is a supply gap, most African countries turn to feel the impact. Most recently, a UN chartered ship loaded with Ukrainian wheat destined for millions at risk of starvation in Ethiopia arrived in Djibouti on Tuesday. The grains are expected to reverse the food shortage in Burundi, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Somalia, South Sudan, and Uganda. In line with what Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara said via his representative, Patrice Achille, At the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, Africans given our endowments could take this global crisis to an advantage in a bid to foster growth and development on the continent. Having listened to the report, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Nicol Simon. What is your evaluation of these global food crisis that is affecting Africa at the moment?
All right. Firstly, I'm going to say that, the problem with Africa is that we still have the mindset of dependency. African leaders or Africa as a whole, we still have that mindset of dependency. We want to still depend on European countries for our own development. We want to depend on other countries for our own continent to be developed. And that is what is actually bringing a very big problem. Now, they usually say that when you want to kill a tree, you don't start by the roots, the leaves. You go to the roots. So the problem of Africa is that they try to solve a problem, or they try to treat Africa when it is sick or when there is a problem. But now, if they actually try to actually solve these issues, or they try to develop Africa, it's going to reduce some kind of things like this food crisis we are facing. And the war, which is actually between Ukraine and Russia, has actually made the import and export of food to reduce in Africa. And by so doing, the rate of food prices is gradually increasing to another level. And now, the question is, if African countries were not dependent on these countries like Ukraine and Russia, all these issues that we are facing right now would have not been the case. But now, since we are dependent, or we depend so much on these countries, it now affects us so badly, such that because there is a problem that does not even concern Africa, there's a problem that concerns two other countries, it affects Africa so badly. But what if the African leaders, what if the African politicians, those who are up there, they actually had the mindset of leaders? I mean, when I talk about leaders, I'm not talking about politicians only. I'm talking about those who are vision bearers, those who believe in the future of Africa, those who do not see the future of Africa with their eyes, those who see the future of Africa with a vision that they can actually invest in Africa. They can actually invest in agriculture. Now, it is so sad to know that Africa actually has over 60% of unused lands. I mean, over 60%. But now, shockingly, all these spaces are not being used. Right? They have not actually seen agriculture. They have not actually seen agriculture like an economic opportunity. They are seeing agriculture like a social use. And that is where the big problem comes in. If African leaders, if government can actually see into agriculture, invest in agriculture, these issues of food, increase of food prices and everything would have not been the case. But hundreds of millions of Africans are actually into poverty right now. They are in misery. They spend days without even eating because of bad governing, because of the fact that African leaders, African governments, African countries have not actually seen agriculture like an economic opportunity. They are seeing it like a social use. And even those who are into agriculture, we have not modernized that sector, and that is a very big problem.
Of course, Mr. Nicol, we're going to be coming back to that, given that you did sideline, of course, pinpoint the aspect of agriculture on the African continent. But then I would like to get the view of Mr. Neba. What do you think is at the helm of this global crisis that is affecting Africa, given that Africa is indeed endowed with a lot of natural resources?
Africa's issue is the lack of human resource. We have natural resources, but we don't have the human resource that can turn these natural resources to useful for use of consumption. Like we have the case of agriculture now, that we're facing food crisis in Africa because of a war somewhere far off that doesn't concern us. You know, this is just to expose us, and it's a shame. Sincerely, it's a shame to us that there's a war that is happening somewhere, and we are dying here without bullets. Bullets pointed at us. It exposes us. Like they would say, when the wind is passing, you have to see the fowls end us. It's just showing how dependent we are, as my brother rightly cited, which is a call, it's an urge for us to get up and till our own soil, you know, mechanize our own soil, do some industrial agriculture in order to be able to feed ourselves. Several African countries are talking about emergence. They have given visions, 35 years, 60 years of emergence and stuff like that. There's no way you can emerge when your neighbor is feeding you. That's somebody that is fighting somewhere, or two people fighting somewhere, who are not even our neighbors. They are not close to us, and we are lamenting, we are sweating. It's really an issue. And I want to say this goes to everybody in Africa. As far as you call yourself an African, it's a problem to you, and when you see it, don't fold your arms and point fingers at anybody, because it comes from us growing up and always preferring to consume foreign products, because the small farmers who are trying to cultivate the soil and come up with products that we can consume. When we go to the market, we choose foreign products over these local farmers, which becomes difficult for these farmers to sustain. And the next thing is that you have to wind out. You understand? We have the mentality that when you are consuming foreign, you are of the superior class, you know, which is something that I don't know whether they'll need to use a syringe to get into our head and you know, get that out. But I think this crisis has really taught us a lesson to know that we are trees where our roots are dependent on somebody else, which means that we are not existing. Because the moment the roots are shaking, we see ourselves drying up or falling off because we are not rooted. So this is the time for Africans to get to work. I mean, some time ago, the president of Cameroun urged young people to get to the farm. It was a political campaign, and we took it to be a mockery, you understand, but we did not really see it. But I also want to applaud the fact that at least in Cameroon, there are some young people who have really started to change that mentality. Because when I was growing up, I knew farming was for old people. Young people had to sit in offices and do stuff. There's no human being that will go 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. A normal human being doesn't eat, which means that the basic need of a human being is what? Food, water. But if we can't cultivate our own soil. Sometimes I analyze with my friend here in the office, we do some analysis, and we're so bitter that one foreign company comes to Burundi here in Cameroon, get water from our soil, bottle it, and they're selling it for at 400. That's insanity. What stops us young Cameroonians to be able to bottle same water and drink, or sell among ourselves and generate that money and be able to boost our economy? So there's a lot that's happening in Africa, and the wiring has to start with mindset, but also start, you know, accepting our own products and consuming them, while the producers are also growing, you know, in their standardizations to make sure that our products can be competitive in the market.
Exactly. It has to start with us promoting ourselves, promoting what we do before we can, of course, promote those out of the continent. Back to what you earlier mentioned, Mr. Nico, on the agricultural sector. I remember some time ago, Dr. Adesina of the Africa Development Bank said, for Africa to be able to get out of this global food crisis, we'll have to boost our agricultural sector. So now I'd like to ask you, you've cited a list of things that you think Africans can do, and haven't listened to what Mr. Neba said. What do you think the African continent can do in order to boost the agricultural sector?
All right. Now, firstly, the first thing that needs to be done is that Africa actually needs to modernize the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector is so underlooked upon. I mean, they don't really take it seriously. And this aspect is not actually modernized. It is shocking to know that Africa actually imports over $35 billion of food every year. I mean, they import $35 billion of food every year in a continent that has raw materials, in a continent that has everything. We have lands, we have all the raw materials, but yet we import $35 billion of food, and majority of it comes from Ukraine and Russia. That's a shame. And yet we say that, like my brother just said, countries are saying that they want to be independent, they want to get to a state of emergency or whatsoever in 2035. That's impossible. Impossible. You can never become that. We can never get to that level if we are dependent on other countries. So the first thing that African leaders need to do is that they need to invest in the agricultural sector. They need to modernize the agricultural sector. They need to invest in the knowledge of Africans. They usually say that knowledge is power, but that's wrong. We have the knowledge, but we are not applying the knowledge. It is the right application of knowledge that gives power. So the African leaders need to apply the knowledge they have. They need to teach actually the young ones. They need to modernize this aspect. We have the raw materials. For example, we have a lot of parents who make maize, they plant wheat and many things. But now, how many of them are able to transform all these things into usable products that we can use? Majority of farmers, or those who do in large-scale agriculture, they finish everything and then they have to send it to other countries. And these people who do everything there and then they send off the chaffs, they will not send off the real things. And that is how Africans are dying. But why don't we have those industries in Africa? Why don't we have all those manufacturing industries where we have the raw materials? Listen, Africa is so rich. Africa is super rich, but the problem is that we are so, I don't know if I can call it stupid, because we have everything, we take it and give to other people, we tell them to transform it and give it back to us, whereas we have the land where we can build those factories. We have knowledge where we can build those factories. We have the people that can work in those factories, but Africans are there, they are jobless. They don't have food to eat. They have the knowledge. In fact, there are people who are ready to work, but now the African leaders, in fact, the African government as a whole, they are not doing what is needed for Africa to actually get to that level of development. So the agricultural sector really needs to be looked upon, because trust me, this is an important sector that is going to really fight the aspect of food prices. Now, other people are fighting in other countries. It does not really concern Cameroon. I mean, it's like somebody is drinking alcohol in another town and then you are getting drunk in another town. It does not make sense. Just because we are so dependent on these people who do not even care about us. They don't care about us completely, but we depend on them. But do you know that Africans actually have the possibility of becoming greater than all these other nations? We have everything it takes. So, what I will say is this. The African government should invest in institutions that trains the youth on agriculture. They should invest in institutions that trains the youth on how to transform the raw materials that we are already having. They should invest in youth. They should open institutions that trains youth. They should encourage entrepreneurship. They should encourage youth out there to get into agriculture. The government of Cameroon actually said some years ago that youth should wake up and go to the farm. It's not okay like that. We go to the farm, yes, we go and plant and do everything they want. But now, where are the factories to transform all these things so that we can use them? We can also export food. We can export everything to other countries, but we cannot do this because we are dependent on those countries. We have not yet modernized. They have modernized their system. We have the raw materials, so we finally depend on them. But what if we have the raw materials? What if we can modernize that sector? Do you know how Africa is really going to get to the next level? So I'll call on African leaders to be visionaries. They should invest, they should believe first of all in the future of Africa. Before saying that they want African countries, before being an African leader, you say that you want your country to be an emergent state in 2035 or whatsoever thing? Do you even believe, first of all, in your nation? Do you believe in the youth of that country? If you do believe in the youth of that country, if you don't believe in your country, then therefore you should invest in the agricultural sector. You should make that sector to be modern so that we can actually grow to that level that we want to be in 10 years or 5 years from now. Remember, we should not treat the problem as at now, but we should look at the long term and treat the problem that is going to come even in 5 years from now.
Exactly, we should look at it from a future perspective. Just to recall that, of course, Dr. Ningwa Niam, who is equally an entrepreneur in Cameroon, said one time that African nations should actually collaborate amongst each other for us to be able to excel, bringing about the Ubuntu perspective that I am because you are. Over to you, Mr. Neba. What do you think as the role of African leaders in this fight against this global food crisis?
Well, it's not unfortunate that African leaders have always been passive, and not for me to disappoint myself, I don't always like to count on them, because I've grown up seeing these guys being there with a lot of things and not manifesting them, which has really made me to keep them aside. But mind you, when we talk about agriculture and feeding a whole nation, feeding a whole continent, we are not looking at some peasant farming. We are talking industrialization here, and industrialization comes from the government. Government has this power to engage or to enforce industrialization. That can either take place by them either investing in the industrialization or making policies that can permit the private sector to get into industrialization. And also, there are things, the public goods like roads, access to farm to market roads, which is still a problem in Africa. Unfortunately, I've not been to other African countries. I've never left Cameroon, but from my perception of what Cameroon is and what I've learned out of research, it's very evident that these major things that can foster agricultural development are lacking in our countries. Most of these leaders, unfortunately, don't even fit from what is made in Africa. Most of them spend their time, living out of their countries, which is a major problem. So they have to take charge. They have to define policies. I read about Israel and how they became a world power. If you study history, you understand that after World War II, Israel was almost non-existent. I mean it. Like they were almost extinct in the world. But they managed to gather themselves back from several places. They break away of the Soviet nation, and they gather themselves together. And as we speak today, Israel is not even up to 10 million inhabitants. The population is less than 10 million, but they are a world power. Why? Because from what I studied, they have an agenda that is a government agenda that build communities in all sectors in the economy, and make sure that they provide them with necessary resources, necessary policies that can permit them to grow. And through that, a small country like Israel is a world power. When America is talking, when France, when China, when Russia is talking, Israel is talking. But you want to look at the population of Cameroon, we are about 27 million to 30 million, and a small nation somewhere like Russia, there's this war somewhere that doesn't concern us. We are suffering. Why? Because we are so individualistic, from us as the citizens of the country to the government. Government officials don't care about them. Sincerely, I don't like talking about politics because I might be too frank. Government officials make promises, but when they get to the offices that can permit them to take decisions and do implementations that can foster development, especially in the domain of agriculture, they don't implement these policies. And we see this happening year in, year out, year in, year out. And here we are today lamenting in the situation of a war that doesn't even concern us.
Thank you, Mr. Neba. Of course, we're going to proceed, but before then, we continue with this conversation. I'd like you to take a listen to this excerpt drawn by our newsroom, of course, on the food crisis, the challenges that the African continent is facing with regards to the African Climate Week that held in Libreville. This excerpt is done to us by the Deputy Director of the United Nations Environment Program for Africa, Dr. Richard Munan. Take a listen. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to listen to this excerpt, of course, compared to us by a newsroom regarding the African Climate Week. It's done to us by the Deputy Director of the United Nations Environment Program for Africa, Mr. Richard Munan.
Your Excellency, Professor Lee White, Excellency Minister Tobiko, Excellency Commissioner Sako, the UN Resident Coordinator and sister UN agencies, all protocols observed. Having a good discussion is like having riches. Our 5 days here in Libreville, a beautiful city, have actually enriched our minds, as we've already heard. We extend our heartfelt appreciation to the government of Gabon for being a hospitable, for being an exemplary host of this year's Africa Climate Week. Gabon have paved the pathway, showcasing to the world that we can actually do it, being the most carbon positive country in the world, thanks to your remarkable effort to protect your forests and restructure your economic growth to reprioritize low carbon pathways. This conference, as you've already heard, brought together state and non-state actors whose actions and decisions and investments are critical to addressing social inequalities, advancing climate action, safeguarding people's lives and ecosystems. As the United Nations Environment Program, we were opportune to participate in series of dialogues and heart-enriching discussions, from nature-based solutions to safeguarding sustainable cities, and the enablers were discussed, to critical methane action, which is a timely area that needs to be looked into, to enhancing action on global tech, to dialogues on critical finance area where Africa have to bridge the gap. But one thing that came out very clearly, Excellency, was that we need a whole of society approach. And we must tap into the biggest constituency of the entire African continent, her youth, because these are Africa's powerhouse, and we must tap into the ingenuity. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this edition of the Africa Climate Week came at an opportune moment as we head to COP27, which has been christened the African COP, knowing fully well that rain does not fall on one roof alone. The successes of Libreville will reverberate across the entire world and pave the way and provide a springboard for Africa to be able to seize opportunities. Because we understand and know, as Chinua Achebe said, when we gather in the moonlight, we do not do so because we cannot see the moon or the sun outside. We do so because it is the right thing to do. These 5 days in Libreville, sons and daughters of the African continent and of the entire global community came together because it is the right thing to do. These 5 days show the unity of purpose, but unity of purpose because it, in our conscience, when we see mothers burying their kids before they reach the age of 5 because they don't have nutritious food. Yes, unity of purpose to ensure that the runaway climate change and pollution that kills over 700 Africans each and every year should actually be stopped. Unity of purpose to ensure that the disenfranchised youth who get into the labor market each and every year without finding jobs, we can actually be able to reverse this. And we have done that through this African proverb that when spiders unite, they can tie down a lion. Thank you.
When spiders unite, they can definitely tie down a lion. Of course, gentlemen, haven't listened to this except done to us by Dr. Richard Munang. He did say that we must include the youth when it comes to this fight against the climate change, fight against the crisis that the African continent is facing. What is your take on this? I'm directing this question to you, Mr. Nicol Simon. Mr. Nicol Simon?
Yes.
Okay, so I was saying that having listened to Dr. Richard Munang on how his own way of how we can tackle the crisis that the African continent is facing, he did say we must include the youth, and this brings us back to what you earlier said, that the youth have a great role to play. So are you in line with what he actually said?
Yes, I am actually in line with what he said. I was actually coming to that point, because there is one thing we cannot just keep blaming maybe the government. We cannot just keep blaming our economy or whatsoever thing. You know, they say that be the change you want to see. So everything should also start from us, the youth. So all the youth out there, they can actually take upon themselves to get into the field of agriculture. If the government refuses to provide the support, if the government refuses to provide institutions that can help train persons out there in the field of agriculture or whatsoever, we can take decisions upon ourselves. We can unite even among ourselves to actually get into this aspect or into this field of agriculture in a professional way. So we cannot only keep depending on the government. I've seen a lot of youth out there, like Mr. Paul Azini just said, I've seen a lot of youth out there who are gradually getting into agriculture. They are not even waiting on the government. They are not waiting for any employment. They are not waiting for anybody, but yet they are taking actions and getting into the field of agriculture, and they are changing lives, and they are independent. They don't need to depend on the government again. So the youth out there should stop also complaining just about the government. The government can never satisfy everybody. That's just the simple truth. Let's be frank with everybody. Let's be frank to each other. The government can never satisfy everybody. But now, what happens if you are not among those whom the government can satisfy? You have to take action to change your own life by getting into the field. Nowadays, we have Google, we have YouTube, we have books, we have ebooks, we have a lot of things, resources, even online on the internet. When I wanted to start, for example, my agricultural business, I didn't go to any school that has to do with agriculture. No, what I did was that I simply went online, I went on Google, I typed some keywords on agriculture. I did a lot of research for over 6 months, and I decided to now get into agriculture. I did not go to any school. But now, what if the youth can have that kind of mindset? What if the youth can have that kind of mindset whereby they can decide to get into the field? When you start it, even God himself is going to see your effort. And trust me, there is no way we are not going to get to that level which we want to become. There is no way we are not going to get to the level of other developed countries, which we always admire. Because if we admire these countries, if we want to become like these countries, then it starts from us. It starts from us, the youth. We usually say that we are the leaders of tomorrow. How can we be the leaders of tomorrow if you are not doing things that can make us become leaders tomorrow? We prepare tomorrow from now. So the youth have to take action. They need to rise up. They need to wake up from that sleep. They need to wake up from laziness. You need to wake up from that bed that you are that makes you lazy. That you need to get rid of that dependency mentality and start taking action. You have an Android phone. You have internet connection. You can actually learn a lot from the online space, and you get into any field. Trust me, you can become whatsoever thing you set your mind to become if you decide and you determine yourself to become that thing. So the youth out there who want to actually change their narratives, you can get into agriculture. It is a very, very paying industry. All right, but you will not succeed in it if you just get into the field like a mediocre. Mediocre in the word at large don't make. You can get.
Yeah, right on, Mr. Nicol. I think we'll be getting back to you shortly. Over to you, Mr. Nebapol. I'd like to ask, having listened to what Mr. Nicol Simon did said regarding how the youth can actually engage themselves into the fight against these global food prices, what's your opinion? If you had to give a word to the youth, what would that be?
Well, Sharon, I must say I have a personal problem with this saying that youth are leaders tomorrow. I mean, everything being equal, the youthful stage is the most active stage in the life cycle of a human being. And if you are youthful and you are leading tomorrow, I wonder what you're doing with that activeness, that energy of today. I mean, youth are leading today. It is now that you are young, that you have the good mentality, the good physique, the good muscles to be able to do whatever thing you can do and excel very well. So in the line of agriculture, that doesn't differ. That doesn't differ. I think youth should do better in agriculture than older people because they have all it takes. They have all it takes, and fortunately for us young people today, technologies have come in place that we can easily master them and apply them in agriculture more than those our elderly people in the society. So youth are those who are supposed to champion agriculture in whatever thing they are, in whatever milieu they find themselves, in whatever country, especially in Africa. Why? Because they have all it takes. And secondly, I don't always want to look at the government. It doesn't take you the government initiative for you to start a farm. Like most of us who grew up in the farm, I mean, we grew up farming and eating, and our parents could do farming and raise money and send us to school. That doesn't mean that when we graduate, we should forget about what could raise money to send us to school. If they could raise money from farming out of their little knowledge that they have, it means that we who are educated, if we embark on that same activity that could give them money, it's going to give us a lot of money. And it is very possible. We like, you know the initiative I'm engaged in, the project we are working on, how we made it in Africa. It is simple. Young people work together, come together and see how you can generate resources and finance your own agricultural products. It's as easy as that. The issue is that we young people, we don't know how to work together. We don't. It's not unfortunate that the educational system has something to do with this, because in the classroom we have to hide our answers, we have to fight to be first, not to be last. But in real life, we have to work like a team. But now, for somebody like me who spent about 18 years in school, learning how to work alone, and then facing a life where I need the hand of another youth to work, it becomes so difficult for me to integrate. Why? Because I am not wired to work with other people. I'm wired to work alone. But since we have access to knowledge, just like my brother said, we have access to books, we have access to the internet, the biggest university in the world, which is YouTube. We can learn anything that we want to learn in the world. And it's been evident, you can't do anything alone. Even the youth are engaging in agriculture. If they want to go solo, they want to go like individuals, they are not going to achieve anything worldwide. So the underlying factor is that youth should champion agriculture. Youth should put themselves in groups irrespective of their ethnic background. Because one issue that we have in Africa, excuse me, especially in Cameroun, where we have about 200 plus ethnic groups, is ethnicity. Something that is supposed to be an advantage to us has turned to be a disadvantage. Use of this particular ethnic group doesn't want to identify with this ethnic group because crazy reasons. We have to wipe that out and understand that we are Africans, we are young, we are smart, we have the energy, and Africa belongs to us. And if we must build Africa today and tomorrow, agriculture is the number one. There's nothing a country can do if they cannot feed their own people. I mean, basically, how life is supposed to be, young people are in the engine of the economy. Why? Because they take care of the young and they take care of the old. But in Africa, it's not the same. That's not the storyline. The old people are those who are regarded to be working in the farm, while we go to school and sit in air-conditioned offices and we earn less than $200 a month. So youth are supposed to champion agriculture in anywhere they find themselves in Africa, and the best way to do that is to put themselves in small communities, galvanize resources, and get to action. Growing up, I saw my mother doing this. You see my mother with her friends, 5 of them, 10 of them, together. Today they are going to till this person's soil. Tomorrow they are tilling this person's soil, and through that they could help each other, you know, build good farms. But we young people today, we do not pick any lessons from that. If we must get into agriculture, let's learn what our parents were doing. Let's apply the knowledge that we have acquired. Let's get more knowledge, and certainly we are going to drive the agricultural problem that we're having in Africa, and food crisis will not be a problem in the continent that God has raised us.
Exactly, that's a very great contribution there, Mr. Neba. Just to recall that recently the first UN ship transporting grains from Ukraine arrived in Djibouti and was expected to feed some 1.5 million people in about 6 countries in East Africa. So, Mr. Nico, I'd like to ask you, how feasible is this move made by the Western world in order to tackle food crisis on the African continent? How feasible is this?
Well, I'm going to say that they are trying to solve a short-term, they are trying to bring a short-term solution and create a long-term problem. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. They are trying to bring a short-term solution and create a long-term problem. What do I mean? I earlier said that we should stop treating Africa only when we have crisis, but instead we should look at it in a structural way. We should solve the issue in a structural way. Yes, it is good to do that, but now, are they going to keep depending on these people, on the international body for food? Are they going to keep depending that way? Definitely no. So what about tomorrow? What about our children who are to come? What about our children's children? How are they going to survive? They are giving them the food today to eat, or maybe the food they are going to survive for the next 1 month. But what about the future? That is the problem. And this is why I said that the leaders are those who see the future, not with their eyes, but with vision. If they are visionaries, if they are vision bearers, these are not the kind of steps they should take. Instead, they should build factories, they should build industries that the people who are in the agricultural sectors in these non-developed countries, they can transform their raw materials for themselves, not bringing food from their own countries and feeding these people. They are making them slaves. They are building the mindset of dependency. That is what they are actually doing. But they are making it, they are trying to make it look like it's beautiful or it's some kind of humanitarian action. Trust me, it is not. They are trying to make us continuously depend on them. They should use that money, build factories. They should use that money, invest in people, let them have knowledge on transforming their own raw materials. That is not a problem to solving the food crisis in Africa. That is not the solution in solving that problem. That is not the solution. Instead, that is creating more problem on an existing problem.
Okay, that was a strong one there. Mr. Neba, I'd like to ask you, do you really think, having listened to your co-panelists, do you really think that Europe can feed Africa, given that Africa mostly supports or exports raw materials to the Western world?
Well, Sharon, I always ask, my history books in the primary school taught me that civilization started in Africa, you know, but what I'm experiencing is that Africa, at one point in time, Africa became a dark continent and Europeans were fighting to give light to them. What happened along the way? What went wrong? You know, I mean, basically, somebody cannot feed you food. Nobody can feed an adult food, never ever. If your neighbor is giving you food, you can't eat the dose you want. You just eat what they give you. And when they get to give you food, they give you what they want to give you, and you just have to eat that, and that is it. Basically, what has killed Africa, not only in the agricultural sector, is the aspect of us receiving gifts, if I must say poison gifts from Europe. What happened? What happened to visionary African leaders who could see a possible crisis coming and preparing for it. I grew up in the primary school. I used to see pictures of Ethiopia, you know, having
Mr. Neba, sorry to cut you short, but we just want to reiterate that this nation, so to say, especially Ukraine at the time, these are countries in war. How can they definitely feed these countries in Africa when they are at war?
That's an insane part of it that I can't even imagine. A country that is in war is feeding a country that is peacefully existing. I don't know, how does it measure up rationally? It doesn't add up. Normally, a zone in crisis should be receiving food and aid from an Africa that is supposed to be stable. But Ukraine that is in war is shipping food to Africa. That's something that I can't even measure it. I don't see it how it balances. It means in normal circumstances we have refused to benefit from the blessings of the rich soils that God has given us, and we have decided to depend. So much so that even Europe that is bleeding in crisis, bleeding in a war, are still struggling to keep supporting us, which to me is no support. Just like my friend said, that those are temporary measures that can never work. Whenever you are feeding a child, you know, when a child is growing up, you're feeding that child. At one point in time, you need to get that child out of the house. You know, Africa has refused to grow up. From time immemorial, Africa keeps depending on Europe, on Asia, on America. I tend to ask myself, what went wrong? What do they have that we don't have? We have the largest soil, we have the most fertile soil, but we are depending on them for whatever reason I can't understand. It is clear, Africa, what we are lacking is that initiative from our citizens to our leaders to be able to see beyond. And please, we young people, we need to, we've been crying that leaders to change these things for a very long time, and they are not doing that. Are we going to keep crying? No, I grew up seeing this. I'm already making children. Very soon they'll start making their own children, and the story will not be the same. In my generation, I've said never again. That's why we brought the project How We Made It in Africa, that we have put together 1,000 young people, and we are creating businesses that we are going to engage in all activities, including agriculture, where we are going to consume only our own products, and we are going to grow ourselves, and we have plans to multiply this in other parts of Africa.
Isn't it true that the agricultural sector is the backbone of every society? Just to reiterate, in line with what you both gentlemen said, the Ivorian president, Alassane Ouattara, of course, he wants a set that for every agricultural or every community to actually excel, for African leaders to take to their advantage what's happening in the world at this time, they have to transform their economic sectors. They have to transform their economic sectors in order to make it up to standard, so they can actually contend with the Western world. So I'm going to head with you, Mr. Nicol Simon. What do you think is the way forward from all this?
Okay, I want to first of all say something. You just made mention of something, that agriculture is the backbone to, you said something, agriculture is the backbone of what?
Agriculture is the backbone to every society.
All right, I'll say that backbone in Africa has been broken. And in fact, in Africa,
that's why definitely we're talking about it today, because we are trying to see how Africans can take this to their advantage. Because Dr. Adesina always say that the African continent cannot move forward if we don't develop the agricultural sector. Yeah,
that's true. So what needs to be done is, I'll not talk about the youth, I'll talk now about the leaders or the government or the international body. What needs to be done is that the African leaders or the African government, like I previously said, should simply modernize the aspect of agriculture. I'll take an example. I have a lot of brothers out there, I have a lot of friends out there who have come to my office. They told me that they are into agriculture. They do plant maize in a large quantity. Some of them make even sugarcane and many more. But now the question is, they don't actually have these factories where they can now take their raw materials from their farms and transform them. All these things now are sent out of the country, and that is where Africa is dying. That is where Africa is in darkness, because we have not modernized. So the the basis of it all is that we should modernize this aspect. It should be a priority. It should be a need. It should not be a want. That is the problem of Africa. We are seeing agriculture like a want. It is not a want. It is a need. It needs to be modernized. It needs to be taken as a priority. In fact, a deep priority. So, African leaders of government should really look up on investing. I saw a documentary how they were sharing food in South Africa for those who are less privileged or those who are living on the streets. For me, that's not a solution. How long are they going to keep doing that? What if they gather that money? Ask yourself, how much do they spend per day to feed, let's say, 1 million people who are living on the streets? If they use that money and multiply times 365 days, 365 days times 5 years or times 10 years, the money they spend per day and time per year or in 5 years, if they use that money, they gather it, they start up an industry that helps to transform raw materials, Africa is going to get to another level. I mean, people are not going to, the world is not going to understand what's happening to Africa. It's going to transform radically. But that is the problem. We are just looking at it at a short-term level. We are not visionaries. The people leading Africa, they are not leaders. They are just politicians. Not all politicians are leaders. I'm sorry to say it, but not all politicians are leaders, because leaders are those who look at the future. But the politicians are just there to sweet talk you or to make you, they'll take food and give you to eat there and there. You finish the food there, a sava, that's all. But that is not the real problem. That is not the real solution of a problem that we have. The real solution is bringing industrialization or making it modern so that Africa can get to the next level.
Thank you so much for that one. To wrap up with you, Mr. Neba Paul, what do you think is the way forward?
I would still repeat what I've been saying. The way forward is for us young people to take charge. Because as we are going and the way things are going, if we transit the way African youths are going, like these old people actually leave offices and we get to the offices, it's rather unfortunate that we might do worse than what they're doing. So the way forward, what I'm telling Africans is that we have that opportunity that we can put ourselves in small communities and start projects. I believe you inviting me on this platform is because you have noticed the community that we put together here in Cameroon, and we are building a 20 years plan. The government has been planning and not realizing for so long. And truth be told, when you point a finger to somebody else to bring a solution to your problem, you become incapable or you reduce your capacity to be able to solve that problem. Young people in Africa, put yourselves together, learn to work together, get resources, and start small, but with a vision to grow big. And believe me, if we start like this, in the shortest time, we are going to be the greatest continent that we are. These things have happened elsewhere, in Israel, in China. You know, it's not something that we're not reinventing the wheel. It's all about us just copying what has happened in other places, implementing in Africa, and before you know it, we are going to hold our place like #1 in the global scene.
Thank you immensely, Mr. Neba. I want to say a great thank you to you, Mr. Nicol Simon, and of course, Mr. Neba, for taking out time out of your busy schedules to join me on today's edition of Voice It.